Hello, class, or hello, instructor Scott. My name is Makisha Williams. Today we're going to be doing our YouTube presentation. Oh, here is my ID. And today we're going to be talking about chapter 6, which is a chapter that states toxic families and culture. Honestly, I'm going to go ahead and just go over each main point in the chapter simply because it's all the points in the chapter are interesting to me. So the 4 points in the chapter, we're going to be talking about learning violence, familial influences, peer influences, and environmental conditions and influences. Okay, for the first one, learning violence. In the world that we live in, especially today in this 2016 era that we're living in, learning violence can come from anything from books to video games to social media to TV. Everything that we see basically is conditioning a person to learn violence. We see so much in social media in these days. We see people fighting. We see people rallying, violent rallies. We see so much stuff going on in the world that just to learn violence and to learn how to exuberate violence, that's very easy. So for one, especially just speaking from probably like a toddler point of view, from a toddler seeing so much violence in social media and so much violence playing a game on their PS4 or on their iPad playing a game, they can learn that violence just from that, and they can start trying to exercise that violence towards people, and they can start exercising that violence in their mind. So that's how learning violence comes to play in that specific aspect. Now we're going to go ahead and talk about familial influences. That's a big thing because your family does influence a lot of things that you do, believe it or not. You might say, oh, I don't listen to my family. I don't really care what they say. They're not going to influence me, but they really do. If you grew up in an environment where all you see is violence and fighting and beating and all type of negative activity, then eventually, if you don't have a strong mindset, and even if you do, you can grow up and start putting that out to your family, to your friends, to your loved ones. You can start speaking to them, in a violent way. You can start, showing them violence either physically, either mentally or emotionally in some type of way. If you grew up in that kind of violent activity when you were younger, remember when you're younger, that's when you soak up a lot of information. You kind of remember a lot of things and it starts to shape you as a person. So if you grew up in that kind of environment and your family is constantly being violent, constantly being negative, then of course, in some way, some form, and some shape, you're going to end up being negative and you're going to end up being violent to somebody. When it comes to your peers now, peer violence. Peer pressure is a real thing, believe it or not. You can say you're a strong person, you have a strong point of view, you have a strong mind, your friends don't influence you, but believe it or not, your friends do influence you. Because, as a human being, I personally think that we have this kind of ego and this aura to try to feel cool or to try to fit in. So your peers can really influence you. So if you see your peers doing something that is not, not necessarily the right thing, or basically the right thing to do, if they keep on doing it, eventually you're going to do the same thing. That's just the truth. Eventually you're going to do the same thing in some way, shape, or form. So if you see your friends going out drinking, going out smoking, going out beating people, going out doing gang violence, eventually, if you keep on hanging out with that same group of people, you're going to end up partaking in those activities as well. That's just how the human mind works. Yes, people are strong. Yes, people, go against the flow. But eventually, you're going to do something. You're going to do something to end up following that negative crowd and end up doing something in a violent way. On to environmental conditions and influence. Your environment, once that goes back to learning violence, your environment can really shape you and really cause you to start doing violence. Just being in the world that we live in, seeing the things that we see, the environment, can really let you do some violent things. The stuff that's going on in the environment, the fact that, the things are just not going right. It can really cause you to get influenced and to be violent. I mean, when it comes to violent people, as far as like predators or, mass killers or anything of that sort, all of these aspects, learning violence, familial influences, peer influence, environmental influence and conditions, all of that does come into play. Because we all live in the same world, and we all, even though we experience different things, on a level, we all experience the same things, and we see somewhat of a level of the same things. So I personally think, if someone does not have a strong mind, or if someone is constantly seeing that, then they don't see nothing wrong with what they're doing. So when they're going out killing people, when they're going out being violent towards people in any type of way, they don't see that as a wrong thing, because they grew up and they are conditioned to be like that. So all of these aspects really do come into play with these type of people. They really do come into play, because they're constantly seeing this negativity. They're constantly seeing this violence. They're constantly seeing this in their families, in their peers, in their environment. Every single where they're seeing this. So it's constantly replaying in their minds. So they're constantly, literally constantly being violent and constantly learning to be violent. So that's what I have to say about chapter 6. I don't want to go on and on, because I really can. Chapter 6, Toxic Families and Culture. It was a great chapter. Once again, my name is Makisha Williams, and Mr. Scott's class, Professor Scott, this is my ID, and I hope you have a great day.